The Lawrence of Arabia film unit was to flee Jordan when operating a large unit deep in the desert proved too costly even for Sam Spiegel's money-raising abilities. It relocated to Spain, to Seville, where it made a significant contribution to the economy of General Franco and later to a water-starved Andalusia. Arriving in Seville, I was told by the film production office that the unit was filming at the Plaza de España, not too far from my hotel, where a unit car dropped me. I slept well. Morning dawned. Out into the sunlight. Where was I? I stopped for coffee and consulted a street map. I then made my way through narrow paseo and intimate squares. I was, however, totally unprepared for the splendour of the Plaza de España. This, built in 1928 for the Ibero-American Exposition of 1929, provided a setting for David Lean, the director, to film the Cairo scenes, whilst preparations were made for a move to Almeria in Andalusia to complete the desert scenes. He made good use of both exterior and interior of this imposing building to show the arrival of Laurence with his Arab companion at the Officers' Club, causing universal outrage. There followed dramatic dialogue between Jack Hawkins and Peter O'Toole, ending with Laurence agreeing to return to lead the Arab army. In the lunch break, introductions were made, and a unit car took me to a rented workshop with a forlorn 34 PE standing unloved. Simple maintenance served to break me in and to provide a usable silver ghost. I relaxed and awaited developments. One day, walking in the sunshine under the decorative orange trees with hanging fruit, I chanced upon a taxi rank with the usual selection of ramshackle cars. One, a battered Chrysler, was graced by a small, very early 20-horsepower nickel Spirit of Ecstasy. A deal was done, involving £9 10 shillings. A princely sum in Franco's Spain. However, removal proved impossible, so I borrowed a hacksaw from another driver. Fortunately, the early 20-horsepower Mascots had a very deep base or pedestal. 34 PE was now complete, and with Union Jack flying, turned heads wherever we ventured. The production office advised me that the armoured cars had arrived from Jordan and were to be found at the railway goods yard. Would I go to supervise their unloading and move to my workshop? Enlisting the aid of two cheerful railway employees, 68 RM and 82 EM were located and unloaded. These took rather longer to activate, having sand in the most unlikely places. Oddly, these armoured cars, of military appearance, excited little or no interest, Franco's dictatorship making such sights commonplace, perhaps. Whilst in Spain, I made contact with many of the vintage car fraternity, including Nicolas Franco, a nephew of the dictator. Many were the unrestored cars I saw, including this early Delaunay Belleville. Another enthusiast was a Spanish motorcycle racing champion, who said proudly that he owned the unique Pegaso Flying Buttress coupe. I badly wanted to see this rarity, so he fired up his Manx Norton and, bidding me climb aboard, set off on wet cobbles. Destination was a disused, dilapidated garage business, where, sure enough, within crumbling walls, open drains, and flaking plaster, sat, with other oddities, this wildly flamboyant coupe. Known as the Thrill, it certainly was for me then, in its vivid red and glistening black. Now 50 years later, after a spell in North America, it is back in Europe, appearing at Villa d'Este in 2008. A further surprise awaited me when my host advised me that the long time, from 1906, Rolls-Royce agents, Carlos de Salamanca, were still active in Madrid. I seized the opportunity and, hatching a plan, visited the film production office. A reasoned argument for finding useful spares for these old cars operating in tough conditions was made. Contact was made with Salamanca. Yes, spares were held for early cars, but were buried in the stores and would need sorting by a knowledgeable chap. I was flown to Madrid and found a convenient hotel. The stores chaps were instructed to offer me all assistance. Sort I did, for the spares were in a multitude of cardboard boxes, stored on the roof of internal offices. This stack measuring some 30 feet by 4 feet in depth and at head height. The dust, as you might imagine, was very, very thick. This was indeed in Aladdin's cave of treasure. All those items invariably lost from early cars were here, including valve caps threaded for 22mm sparking plugs, from pre-Ghost cars I later learned. After 4 days of dust, a very large pile of needed spares, all in their boxes, were stacked separately to await collection. The stores manager suddenly mentioned larger items and led me to a door off the main stores. A steep flight of steps led downward, and these steps were littered with discarded items. An astonishing number of Silver Ghost trembler coils in their wooden boxes with aluminium lids. A lamp was summoned, and the investigation continued. Lashed to the walls of the staircase were chassis frame side members, including early flat ones. The going was by now hazardous, and I called a halt. But arrangements were put in hand to add the trembler coils and early petrol tanks to my selection to await collection by the film company agents. Farewells were being made in the stores manager's office over several phenos, when I spotted many early Rolls-Royce parts and instruction books. These he personally handed to me, saying he was honoured to help such an epic movie as Laurence of Arabia. These manuals and parts books I carried personally as I flew back to the filming. In 1960, parts were not remanufactured, and reprints of early Rolls-Royce manuals were not available. The 1911 parts book, for instance, was later used to confirm the date of 1701, when found in 1963. Back in Rumsey, the most commodious, practical Rolls-Royce was prepared, even to better headlamps, and Wade Palmer set out for Seville. Arriving safely in the travel-stained Hooper GTZ-80, he was introduced to film unit members, and after a couple of days of careful packing of the more desirable items, GTZ-80 headed for the United Kingdom, noticeably lower on its springs. The larger items accompanied me on the move down to Almeria for the desert scenes, where the cars were used extensively. Cars and spares were returned to the UK at the conclusion of filming in Spain. Wade was still selling these spares at the French's 20 years later. Unfortunately, upon his sudden death in 1984, the books and many other items disappeared within days. The vultures had descended.